Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Her Pan Move TV and welcome to this. It's another roving film review. Unfortunately, I'm not roving right now. I'm actually at home and there is a reason for this. Sorry about that. It's just, I'm about to go to work. When I get to work, I've got to, basically, I'm not going to have a lot of time when I finish work between then and going to the cinema because I want to get the 1 o'clock showing, which means I've got to rush a little bit. I won't have time to do my intro to the film before the film starts. I don't normally like rushing like that. It's quite a long film. If I miss the 1300, the 1 o'clock, 1 p.m, I'll have to get the 2 p.m. and that will actually be, that means it won't get out there until gone 6 or something ridiculous like that. So I'm going to rush a little bit. So I'm doing the intro now. Basically, I'm going to watch a film called Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. It's a sequel to the original Black Panther. Link in the description box, as always, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the long-awaited, or maybe not so long-awaited, sequel. It's Avatar as a sequel. I've been waiting for a long this. Goodness me, talk about development hell. But, of course, this film has suffered its own form of development hell with the death of Chadwick Boseman, the actor who played King T'Challa. He died very sadly when he was at the age of about 46. Very, very sad. Condolences and rest in peace and all that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to go to see this film, and again, I'm curious because the first film, if you remember my review of the first film, everyone was going on at me. People went and saw it long before I did. People went and watched it and they said, Ben, you've got to go and see this film, and you've got to do one of your classic hate reviews of it. Why? I said, because it's full of cultural Marxism. It's anti-white. All right, I said, I'll go and see it. And I went into Black Panther, the first Black Panther, looking for cultural Marxism, expecting to find it. And some of my viewers were disappointed at this, actually. I found very little. I actually thought it was a pretty good movie. It was a pretty good film. Considerably less culturally Marxist and anti-white than most soap operas, ads, and most other TV films, actually. I thought it was actually a really good film. And I said so in my review, as you know, and so I'm quite interested in watching the sequel. Not least because of that incredible postscript. That incredible postscript. You remember I told you, because I'm a good boy. When a film ends, I sit and I keep watching, because you never know, there might be some Easter egg popping up in the middle of the credits. And of course, everyone else is going out. They're all getting up and going out, putting their jackets on, and talking and everything, all heading for the door. And suddenly, boop, the postscript pops up. Oh, there's a bit more. So they stop in the aisle, and they stop right in front of everyone sitting down, and they stare at the screen like that. Oh, look, there's a little bit more there. There's more. We left too early. And of course, I'm sitting behind there going, get out the bloody way. Sit down for... Anyway. But so the postscript of Black Panther is by far the most interesting part of it. I actually did a Hapanmo Voice article especially about this, and I think I might have mentioned it on one of my UFO disclosure videos, but of course it is a disclosure moment. Wakanda decides to share its technology with the rest of the world, and so they all go to the UN, and King T'Challa stands there and he says, we need to build bridges, not walls, and things like this, and these other rather a bit cringy, his speech, you know, obviously having a bit of a go at Trump and things like that, but it is a disclosure moment where the Wakanda basically decides to share its free energy technology with the world. It's just like the breakaway civilization. Wakanda is a kind of breakaway civilization, and they decide to do that, and then you get to the final credit roll, and that's it. So I'm going to do the same this time because there may be another interesting postscript. You know. But you see, I'm very keen because obviously this is Black Panther 2, which means I assume it's not a prequel, it's a sequel, which means it's going to happen after that. So this is going to take place in a post-disclosure world. This film is going to take place in a post-disclosure world. And I mean, maybe that's something I'm very interested to see how someone chooses to portray that. Because if you remember from my Apocalypse video, you know, I think I agree with China Miéville, even though he and I are politically poles apart. You know, there are some future scenarios you cannot actually envisage in today's world. So I'm interested to see that obviously these are people who are now going to try and envisage a post-disclosure world in the modern world. That's that it has to, because it's a sequel. If it is what follows after the postscript, the end of Black Panther 1, then it's going to be a post-disclosure world. Wow. Now there's a chance I might not be able to get into this today, actually, because into this film. I'm going to go along there. Now, obviously, they say, well, why don't you pre-book, Ben? Why don't you pre-book? Well, I could do. But you know me, I like to pay with cash, as I've explained many times. So I'm going to go along, and I'm going to pay for my ticket with cash. Now, it's possible I won't be able to get a ticket for today, because it basically opens today. There was a showing at 9:30 this morning, and it's very rare that cinemas actually do that. Most cinemas open about, their first show is usually about midday or just after. They're opening early. The last time I think they did that was with Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King. I remember I went from a night shift to watch that. So they're opening at 9:30. This is going to be this is a massive thing in terms of popular culture. The whole Black Panther franchise is a huge cultural phenomenon. A lot of people, especially black people, feel a lot of affinity with it, and feel a lot of they feel that they identify very much with the film, which I don't have a problem with, seeing as the film is actually not as harmful as many people claim it is. So if you're a black person and you're watching this and you want to sort of like say, I'm a Wakandan, I'm gonna wear Wakandan clothes, and because people do, they actually are doing this. They're wearing fashions. There are fashions that are based on the costumes in the film, and if you are a black person, you want to do that, that's fine with me. I'd rather you emulated this film than Get Out, or, well, most adverts and soap operas. Quite frankly, it's a lot more healthy. It's a lot more mentally and culturally healthy for you than these other horrible, hate-filled pieces that keep coming out telling you you're a victim and you've got to hate white people and things like this. But while we're on the subject of this, while we're on that subject, unfortunately there have been some, I don't know who it is actually, but I think it was, where did I see this? I think it might have been Sargon on Getter. Yeah, I think it was Sargon of Akkad on Getter. He mentioned, he put a link to a person, some kind of academic, one of these gender study professor people with, the type with dreadlocks and a scowl on their face. And she put out a tweet or something saying, this is the opening weekend of Black Panther 2. Could white people please not go? I'm asking white people not to go and see this film in its opening weekend. Well, and what can I say? Go to hell. I'm white, I'm proud, and I'm going in, okay? You can't stop me. To stop me is racism. It's racism, it's purest and most comprehensive definition. So no, I'm going to use. There's no reason why any white person can't go and see this film. So I'm going to go and see it. I am curious. I don't normally go and see films on their opening weekend. I normally wait maybe a few days until the furore has died down and I go and see a matinee or something. Because I like cinemas though when there's fewer people in them. I can stretch my legs out and things like that. But I'm quite curious to see this on its opening weekend, because I want to see who goes, what the kind of people who go along, their demographics, what their attitude is. Are they going to say anything to me for being there, and things like that? Are they going to wonder what I'm doing when I'm sitting there scribbling with a notebook? Because that's what I do in the cinema. I have a little notebook and I make notes while I'm watching the film for this review. Are they going to say anything? Things like that. I'm quite curious to see if they. I'm quite sure how they respond to this film. People of all races who go and see this film. So I'm watching this film, but I'm also going to be people watching as well. I'm going to be watching the audience, which is going to be huge. I mean, there is a possibility. I mean, I haven't booked online. I could do, but I do have like a moribund account I can use for online bookings. But I'm actually just going to go to the box office. I'm going to pay it with cash. I pay with cash as much as I can. If I can't buy a ticket for today, I'll buy one for maybe another day, and I'll do this review another day. As for the idea that me being white, honestly, I don't think that's really going to be a problem. I think people like this horrible academic who Sargon was quoting are actually becoming more and more of a minority. I think they had their heyday maybe 5 years ago, and now they're starting to sound ridiculous, and more people are seeing through them. I honestly would be very surprised if any white person who goes to see this film in its opening weekend gets any aggravation. I really would be very surprised if that happens. I think this person is just they say horrible things, they get a lot of amplification, but they're just idiots. So, well, I hope I can see it today. If not, I'll do this review another day. I can't do it tomorrow because I'm interviewing somebody. If I can't do this review today, what I'll do is I'll put up a notice for a live stream later, and I'll do maybe the Ghost Watch or the Moment of Contact live stream tomorrow. I'm going to interview someone in the afternoon, And then I'll go and watch the film maybe Sunday if I can. I'll buy a ticket today for Sunday or something like that. Anyway, guys, I'm off to work. I'm going to go to work, then I'm going to go and watch the film. I won't film again. Actually, I won't have time to film again actually until I come out of the cinema. So, have a nice day, everyone. See you later. Well, while I'm out, right, I've made some notes. It's darker now. See, it's funny when you go to the cinema and you come out and it's like darker. It was that's the Odeon George Street where I went to see this film. I made some notes because it's not easy to make notes in a cinema when you're actually sitting there. Very often it's dark, no light, but I thought I'd go through my thoughts on the film anyway. Try and work out exactly. What I thought of it. Now I actually arrived. I don't often do this, and I wasn't going to do this originally because I like to get there early. I always like trying to get there early with films. I don't like to walk in when I certainly wouldn't walk in when the film's going. But I got there like about 1:05. The showing was due to start at 1, and I was wondering if I'd be able to actually get there. I wasn't sure I'd even be able to get there because of various things. It's still going, yeah. Because of timing and everything. I just finished work. I just quickly shot the opening segment, so I'm not going to get there on time. I arrived 1:05. They say, "Do you want to go and see the 1 o'clock show?" And it says, "Oh, it started, hasn't it?" It said, "No, it's just adverts on at the moment. You can go in." I said, "Will it be dark?" "No, we keep the lights on until the film starts." So that's all right. I mean, going in when the ads and trailers are on, all right. It's like when people sort of walk in when the film's actually on going. That's what's bad. That's what I don't like. So I walked in there and I expected to have to struggle to find my seat. Now I managed to get my ticket, and as it turns out, I didn't need to worry because there's only there's probably a dozen people. It was in screen 1, which is like the biggest of the auditoriums, and there was only like about a dozen people in there. I suppose because it's like maybe 1 PM on Friday. It did surprise me though, even though it is like in the middle of the day. Black Panther is such a cultural phenomenon. I assume lots of people would book the day off work to go and see it. They book the day, but no. I mean, you go to a daytime show, and even on the opening, even on the premiere, when it opens, the opening day. And suddenly it's like there's just a dozen people there, and nearly every seat is empty. I don't know. It's that's not a problem, but I bet you. But tonight though, it's going to be packed. Tonight is going to be packed. I say this is a cultural phenomenon. It's absolutely a cultural phenomenon. Now. The film itself was a big disappointment. It was nothing like what I expected it to be. It seems like the first film, it wasn't like what I expected it to be, but this was different in a different way. Again, there was
to be honest, I now know.
It was in terms of the cultural Marxism, the anti-whiteness and things like that people complain about. Again, I found very little of that indeed. And again, it's just if it's there, there's a few subtle things like like there's a girl who's a scientist in the United States who talks down to some white bloke. I mean, but that's a minor thing. And it's like they make jokes about Martin Freeman's character, but they make the same jokes they made in the first film. They call him a colonizer, only on 2 occasions. And like at one point he's in a prison van. He's just been arrested because if you know the story, you'll know that he's kind of acting as a Wakandan spy, even though he's in the CIA, and so he's a double agent sort of thing. And he's in chains. He's in his orange jumpsuit at the back of the van. and he's rescued by a courier. And she says, a colonizer in chains. I like that. And I thought, that's a bit, see, and it's a quite light-hearted thing. It's not really major. Obviously, it's a bitchy, stupid. It's a bitchy comment. It could be interpreted as anti-white, but as I said earlier, you know, really, it's considerably less anti-white than most TV nowadays. It really is. Most TV ads, soap operas. I mean, this is one of the. I'd say both the Black Panther films are probably considerably less white-hating than 90% of television programs and other movies. I don't know why it's been singled out for this sort of thing. Now, my main criticism of this film, this probably won't be as long a review as I normally do, although I'll go through the critics and everything as well. My main criticism of this film is it has like a plot. One plot starts and it just sort of ends and another one takes over. It's a very ungainly and a rather strange and disconnected kind of storyline. It begins with enormous promise, enormous fascination, because this, I suppose, the reason why it has this plot break, this disjointed plot, could be the death of Chadwick Boseman. As you know, and you probably heard right now, Chadwick Boseman, who plays King T'Challa, he died. Now, it wasn't the dreaded death juice. Whenever someone, I think he was 46. Whenever someone sort of under 70 now dies of anything, I think, is it the dreaded death juice? You know, with Gary Roberts, I'm wondering, even though he's over 70. No, it was cancer. He did have cancer, and it's sad. It's a great shame. He was a great actor, played a great character. But you see, the second Black Panther film was probably already in pre-production when the first one was launched. At least it's probably early on. They're probably working on the script and storyboard and things like that when the first Black Panther film came out, which means they probably had some idea about doing a sequel involving King T'Challa. And of course, once the actor's dead, what can you do? Well, there's several options. You could bring him back as a synth thespian, like they did to Princess Leia, which is really stupid. You could continue with another actor, like they did when Heath Ledger died in Batman, and maybe adjust the plot to explain why he looks different, or maybe just overlook the fact that he looks different and just carry on pretending he's not different. He's not, obviously, because the way people look is actually important, is actually a part of the experience of these films. Now, what they chose to do instead, there's bikes coming past. Those are bikes. I was watching this thing on YouTube, and whichever the way to the side. It was a news program from 1970, and they had Warren Mitchell, you know, the guy who plays Alf Garnett. He was like doing a tour of Oxford, and because he actually studied here. He was at Univ in the 40s. Enrolled at the end of World War II, and he's such a posh guy, you know. And I had him down. I just know him as Alf, but it was really interesting. It was really good. He's really cool, that guy, Warren Mitchell. And he did like a tour of Oxford as a tour of Oxford. And yeah, sorry, where was I? Yeah. So if they could have brought in another actor who looked a bit like him and just carried on like nothing had happened, they decided instead to have King T'Challa actually die in the plot, and he dies at the very beginning of the film. You don't actually see him. They like have some CGI model of him lying in a hospital bed. You have his it's reported he's done, and he's in the hospital, but the actual action takes place in the laboratory where Shuri, his sister, is trying to save him. And they can't. And there's this like funeral scene where his coffin is sort of like levitated by anti-gravity, and they're sort of holding onto it. The pallbearers just hold onto it like that. because of course it's levitated by this anti-gravity technology they've invented. And then that means that Ramunda, his mother, goes back to being queen. It's it was a complicated plot, if you remember. Well, the first movie is different because then what happened was that if I remember rightly, T'Challa becomes king after he has to depose this other guy called Killmonger, who's an American sort of expat Wakandan who comes back to like seize the throne. But T'Challa becomes king, and they call Black Panther when he kills Killmonger. And so Ramunda is now queen again, the mother. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is where it really starts off very well, because the first scene is they're in the United Nations. Now, if you remember the postscript in the first movie is the most interesting part of the film, because it takes place at the Wakandan embassy goes to the United Nations. T'Challa, Okoye, and all of them just stand there and they announce that they have this. They've been living in this secret world, cut off from the rest of the world, and they have this like free energy technology, and they're going to share it with the rest of the world. It's a wonderful, dramatic moment, which is kind of like a disclosure moment. Now, what happens is that Ramunda, when she becomes queen, she reverses that decision. She reverses this decision. She says that Wakanda is going to hang on to its vibranium, this mineral that gives them this technology, and it's going to keep that. It's going to go back to its original policy of keeping it secret and not sharing it. It's kind of non-proliferation of vibranium, and non-proliferation, and that. And the reason for this is it can be weaponized, like nuclear power can be weaponized. And so, but of course, just as with nuclear power, so I'm just flipping over here. As with nuclear power, as with nuclear, you can't. Once everyone knows it exists, you can't really keep it secret anymore. So you can't really get that genie back in the bottle. And indeed, there's a scene. What happens is Ramunda goes to the UN, and there's the French ambassador sitting there, looking a very smug white woman, yeah. And she's saying, "Oh, we really want access to this technology, Mrs. Queen, And she says, "Well, you can't, because you'll just turn it into weapons. So we're going to keep it ourselves. The world is not ready for us." To be honest, it could be that some of the breakaway civilization justify themselves in that way. Richard Dolan made this point. They may well justify their own policy of truth embargo that way. They could say, "Well, the world is not good enough for what we know." Maybe they've got a point. But of course, Wakanda, of course, is the equivalent of the breakaway civilization. It's kind of it sees itself as an elite, sitting above everyone else. And of course, it's referred to several times in the script as the most powerful country on earth. Again, I can't fault the production design. Now, you don't see it as much in this film as you do in the first one, but the production design, the way that they've combined this high technology society, this very high tech futuristic type society, with a sense of traditional Africa, is very, very skillful. It's very skillful. Like you go down there, there's like these streets which have where people just dress in these traditional clothing. They have like traditional markets, and towering above them are these skyscrapers that are obviously huge and very, very very well designed, very, very modern, and your anti-gravity craft like flitting above people's heads. There's similar. I hadn't seen this film when I wrote the scene myself, but of course, if you read, especially the third part of the Roswell trilogy that I wrote, Roswell redeemed humanity after disclosure. You know, there are scenes where I've had to kind of reproduce that. I've reproduced that kind of. I've had similar scenes in there because part of that book is set in West Africa, and I've had to create scenes with a similar feel, a combination of the old and the new, the traditional and the super modern. And it's very well done in this film. It's very well done in both films. And what happens is that there's some what they call Wakandan outreach facilities, which may be like embassies, I suppose. But what happens is one of those is raided by French special forces, and Akuya and her Akuya is like this. Well, I'm not going to the way women are portrayed in this is very, very interesting. Okoye, of course, is head of the army. She's like General Okoye, and she and her female warriors, they defeat these French guys, special forces men, who raid a Wakandan center in Mali, they want to get the vibranium, or the secret of the vibranium, the free energy, in other words. And Ramunda, in a typical show of bravado, these guys are all captured with non-lethal weapons. She parades them into the United Nations and makes them kneel in front of the French ambassador, and she goes, "Oh la la," you know, she looks really shocked. Oh god. And it's that to me is a bit crude. On the subject of the production design, again, there's Wakanda has a language which has, I don't know if it's a real language, whether it's a real Niger-Congo type language, because it has that kind of intonation. It has the intonation I'd associate with the languages of Africa. There's one main group called Niger-Congo. It includes Bantu, you know, which is languages all the way from West Africa to the southern tip of Africa, in South Africa, that particular language group. And it sounds, with the intonation, it reminds me of that. Now, it has a script. They've designed a script. I think I made this point before, because what happens is those languages are written with the Latin script today. Because when European explorers arrived in Africa, they found that they report that these people didn't have a written language. Now, you have to let me know if there were, in pre-colonial days, written languages in sub-Saharan Africa. If someone will say, yes, there was, here it is, and I could go home and Google it, and no doubt I'd find one. But Wakanda does have a script, and it doesn't just use the Latin script, it has its own script, because it's never been colonized. Let's just looking at these. So there's a kind of anti-disclosure movement. There's a kind of it's very different from the one in the Roswell trilogy. I mean, this story does have similarities to the Roswell trilogy, I must say. In the Roswell trilogy, the Illuminati try to reverse disclosure with crafty methods. You know, they use various crafty techniques, fake technology, fake alien invasion, things like that. Queen Ramunda just simply says, we've changed our minds. What are you going to do about it? We've changed our minds. So the rest of the world now is going nuts trying to get hold of this technology, because they know it exists. And of course the fear is they'll weaponize it. Yeah. So I'll just go through these notes. Oh yeah. I only wrote on one side of the paper today. Right. There was a theft attempt of the technology from this Wakandan center in Mali, which is in West Africa. And but then there's this weird situation. There's a ship at sea that's trying to. They reckon apparently there's other deposits of vibranium around the world, not just in Wakanda. And various explorers and prospectors go looking for it, and they think it's under the sea, and they have this ship that's sending down divers, and these strange people appear like mermaids, and they have this song which sort of hypnotizes people and makes them jump overboard, which is rather like the myth of the sirens. I don't know if you're familiar with Homer's Odyssey, And there's that pattern there. Some weirdo over there. So yeah, it's rather like that. The sirens are like these beings that live on an island, and anyone who hears them just finds themselves drawn in. They jump off their ship or they drive their ship onto the rocks. And Odysseus, the hero, he wants to hear the sirens, but he's tied to the mast, and all the crew on the ship have earplugs in, so they can't hear the sirens. And indeed, two of the crew on the ship put earplugs in, so they can't hear this weird songing things. So some yeah. So there's like they put their. That's a typical Oxford weirdo. Yeah. So some people say that's me. I'm the Oxford weirdo, but no. So people start jumping off the ship, and it's just like a bit like that story. And then, right. There's a scene I want to talk about where, because they have a lot of death rituals in Wakanda, and it is actually similar to traditional African models. They have, I think, they've done their homework, and I was looking into this. They say when someone's dead, they've gone to the land of the ancestors, and there's like what happens is that they believe that it's possible to communicate. They have abilities to communicate with those spirits at certain times, and Ramunda takes Shuri down. They go down to the side of a river. There's elephants everywhere. It's sort of, and she lights a fire. It's very traditional. And then she says, we're going to try and make contact with your brother T'Challa in the spirit world, in the land of the ancestors. Now Shuri, turns out, is a skeptic. Oh, she's a skeptic. She says, oh, I don't believe in there's a land of the ancestors. I don't believe it. No, doesn't exist. He's gone. Yeah, and I mean, skeptics appear in all cultures. I mean, there probably are plenty of skeptics in there. I mean, there are skeptics in Africa too. And that's when this new character appears, a guy who calls himself Nemo, but he's like this. It turns out he's from South America, but his own people, hundreds of years ago, they were fleeing from the conquistadors, and they found this substance which turned them into mer people. You know, they could only breathe in water, and they were blue in colour. They became sea creatures, and that was them who attacked that ship. And he becomes the principal antagonist of the film. I don't want to go into too details here, partly because I don't want to fill this up with spoilers. But I can't even read my notes. Scribbling in the dark. I don't want to fill this up with spoilers, but also it just wasn't very good. It wasn't a very good story at all. It was like a cheap action movie, really. Because basically there's a just when it's starting to get interesting, and this idea that there's this reverse disclosure process, I thought it was going to really run with that, and maybe the original plan was for it to run with that particular plot before Chadwick Boseman died. I think that might have been the original plan, but then he died, and so we're going to be going to an alleyway in a minute. It'll be a bit quieter. And maybe it was his death and the fact that he decided to weave that into the story, which meant they probably had to ditch a lot of concepts from the original script. As a result, also hundreds of pages probably had to be binned, and they had to start again. This sometimes happens with writing, unfortunately, if you're right. And it could be that that's what caused this abrupt 90-degree lurch in the whole story, because that entire plot completely fizzles out almost immediately, and it's replaced with what I can only describe as a cheap action movie involving Nemo, this guy. He calls himself Kukulkan, and again, that's from South American legends, because the native Maya believed in a god called Kukulkan who had wings, and this guy does have wings on his ankles. Looks very weird. He tries to form an alliance with Wakanda, but he kidnaps Princess Shuri, and and there has to be like a rescue operation. First one, Okoye fails badly, and she's stripped of her rank. But eventually, Shuri does escape, and this American girl. They find a young American genius, a 19-year-old girl who is, of course, black, and who's working for the CIA while she's doing a degree at MIT, and they do escape, but in doing so they kill Nemo's daughter in self-defense, and as a result he says, we're going to go to war against Wakanda, and the rest is just basically a series of fight scenes. That's all you can call it, just a series of fight scenes. Where are we now? There's some of it's a bit silly, like for example when they're rescuing this girl, she's actually wanted by the FBI in Boston, where she lives, where the university is, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. One of the rescue party goes up in like this flying suit, which the Wakandas use, shoots down a drone, which then crashes exactly on the police roadblock, allowing the protagonist to get across the bridge on their escape route. I mean, let's just talk about Deus Ex Machina. Alright. There's also Charles' wife comes back in, who's called Nakia. His wife is, Nakia lives in Haiti, and speaks French. There's a lot of substance. It's almost like Moment of Contact. A lot of the dialogue is in foreign languages. It's in the Mayan language, in Wakandan, which I think may be a constructed language based on Niger Congo, French, Spanish. You know, there's lots of foreign languages in this. So she helps them find Shuri, and then Shuri has they do this, like she wants to go to they make her take this stuff that sends her to the land of the ancestors. That happened in the first film, I remember, but unfortunately Shuri finds herself in a room with Killmonger, and he says, are you gonna be an idealist like your brother, or are you gonna get the business done like I did? So he's kind of looking, trying, even as a spirit beyond the grave, he's coming back to try and ruin everything for Wakanda. You see, it's and he says things like, we'll burn the world together, and let's have a look. Then there's just this war, there's this, like I say, series of fight scenes, really. And you introduce, there's a lot of introductions to people who were in there before. There's like the Calibans. The Caliban are they're these guys. They're quite funny, actually. They're all men. They live high up in the mountains, and they in the original Marvel comic they model themselves on gorillas, which of course they have to play down in the cinema, don't they? Because it's very politically incorrect. But they make gorilla noises like that. They're just, I think they're comedy characters more than anything. So where are we now? Okay, let's go through. I think that's the end of my notes. I didn't make many. I should say something like the real sort of cultural Marxist in it is actually not along racial lines, but along gender lines. The women. There's a lot of very androgynous women in this, and of course it was more so than in the previous film. The first film, there is of course Okoye, who is like a general in the army, who is this slender, muscular female with no hair. She's got no hair. She has tattoos over her scalp. Again, sort of very, very strong, very martial, fighting all the time, beating up big tough guys and things like that, which is very unrealistic. And in this film, of course, Shuri is also very similar. She's not bald, but she has like short hair. She has very short hair, cut short at the sides. She has like a big, prominent chin, male-like features on her face. Slender, muscular, quite flat-chested. Again, unfeminine. And so you have these very tough, very masculine, unbutch-like androgynous women, and I'm seeing that more and more in films everywhere. I mean, really, Rey from Star Wars is very similar. Even though she's female, she might as well not be, because she's so unfeminine. And that to me feels wrong. It feels wrong to me. These characters could just easily be made. It would be better simply to make these characters male, make them men. Instead of having a princess Shuri, have a prince, whatever, and make him the fight. Yeah, he can do the fighting. Same with Okoye. Okoye would be suited better if she was a man to the role, but they made her a woman, and I see Hollywood doing this more and more and more. At the end, there's a postscript at the end. I mean, there's only like, it wasn't so bad this time, because in the first film, of course, you have like, it's the same structure. You have like an animated credit sequence to begin with, and then you have like a postscript, then the credit roll, where the word, the words just go across the screen. So this credit sequence, the animated credit sequence gave way to the postscript, and of course by that time some had already left, some had already walked out, they didn't see the postscript. Others were sort of like stopped and stared, which didn't, like I say, weren't so bad. When I saw the first film, I saw it in a packed cinema the first time, the first film, and of course when the postscript starts, everyone just stops and stands. They don't sit down, they're already getting up and leaving the cinema, and they just stop and they, oh look, there's a bit more, and they just stop and they stand there like that, right in front of me, so I can't see the damn screen. This is why when I'm in the cinema, I always wait till the end, and I did this. I watched it right to the end until the lights went on and the screen went black. I watched the entire credit roll. It's quite good actually. There's some quite good music in it, some like weird, quite unusual music in it, in the credit sequence. But there was a postscript where Shuri is mourning her mother. She's lost her brother, she's lost her mother, all in the space of a year. She's weeping, and then Nakia approaches. She was a spoiler, but there always going to be a few. Nakia approaches her and introduces her to a young boy. She says, "This is my son." She says, "Which son? The son I had with T'Challa." Let's see, the first time I've heard about this. She says, "We kept him secret." So she meets her nephew, and when she asks his name, he gives her a fake name. He says, "But my real name is T'Challa. I'm the son of King T'Challa." So that's the postscript, and then it's just the credit roll. So bad, I'd say I'll give it 3 out of 10. As I said, I'm not really concerned about it on like a level of cultural Marxism, because there's almost none in there. There's literally almost none in there. But it's just like it starts off with a lot of promise, a very interesting plot, which then completely dissolves and gives way to a pretty one-dimensional action movie, actually. Something not really much going on, is there? So that's it really. Let's see what the critics have to say.
Okay, guys and gals, now we're going to go and see what the critics have to say. The critics, we're so superior because we're critics. Well, let's see how superior they are. Where else are we going to start with but the Guardian, the Caridian? I have to do the voices. Now, the voices aren't just for fun. It's so you know when I'm reading and when I'm talking. It makes it easier to do this sort of thing. So... Black Panther, Wakanda Forever review, Grief Shadow superhero sequel. Well, that's true. Oh my god, this is Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian. He gave it 3 stars. Only 3 stars? The racist pig. Shamed around the loss of its original hero, Chadwick Boseman. This take pays tribute to the late actor with fiery performances and great spectacles. Yeah, there we are. That's Shuri there at the funeral in the photo. Yeah. The fictional All right, we don't need to go through the plot. I'm going to skip the plot bits. Black Panther movie, whose exuberant and mournful impulses are at odds with each other. Yeah. We also see in almost real time a franchise coming to terms with the loss at the same time of its fictional characters. Yeah, the franchise, did actually say at the end of the second one in the postscript, Black Panther will return, and the postscript leaves an open door actually for a future program, for a future film, because there's a new character introduced, a new plot element is introduced right at the end. Yeah, because of course he was 43. It says here he died of cancer at just 43 years of age. Now this film pays a heartfelt and decent tribute to his memory in a drama shaped around this sudden blow, making an honest attempt to shape a superhero film around the subject of grief. That's actually a good point, actually. As I explained, the plot of the decision they've made, and the filmmakers, is to model the fictional universe of Black Panther on the real world. So the actor of King T'Challa, the actor dies, Chadwick Boseman. So his character King T'Challa dies very suddenly as well, and the subject of grief comes up an awful lot in the film. I must admit, it's of course we see bereavement. We see Shuri and her mother being bereaved at the loss of T'Challa. She comes in and says he's gone to the kingdom of the ancestors, and Shuri just breaks down at the beginning in the first scene. And of course, there's that amazing scene that I talked about earlier where I think that I remember the script in better detail now. Ramonda is actually saying explaining to Shuri that T'Challa's gone to the kingdom of the ancestors to be with the rest of the family, and she says, as I said, she's a skeptic, she's a scientist, she's a biologist, she works in the laboratories, and she says, no, mother, it's just your wishful thinking. She lays out the typical skeptic line. Yeah, it's really quite something. Yeah, and of course this does overshadow, I think, the whole thing. Yeah. And this, I'll just skip a little bit here. I think the people are called Calibans. I don't know why I called them Calibans, but there is they're called Jabari, the guys from the mountains, the funny guys, and they are funny more than anything else. Yeah, and it goes through the kind of goes through the plot here. This review actually doesn't say anything I really disagree with. It's pretty much just outlines the plot and explains what's happened in terms of the casting and how that has influenced the film. I think that's actually a good point. I think maybe it would have been a better film had it not had this element, had not had this element of loss and grief, which unfortunately can't really be avoided in life. And yeah, so I'm not going to take the mickey out of the Guardian this time as much as I normally do. And so, with no further ado, let us move on to the Tory graph. What has the Daily Telegraph had to say about this? Well, this is my Telegraph voice. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever review. A drab, crushing disappointment. Yeah. It was a disappointment, yeah. With murky and meaningless visual effects, Marvel's turgid sequels pale into comparison to the Chadwick Boseman original. Yeah, I have to agree with that. Back in 2018, just as Marvel fatigue was first threatening to set in, the comic book studio unveiled Black Panther, a vibrant, dynamic, pop epic. Concerned with matters far weightier than who would win the fight between super-suited beefcake A and B, 4 years later this jewel in the franchise's crown has sadly beget one of its drabbiest, staliest, most incoherent sequels, a near 3-hour endurance run of gloomy photography, and turgidly staged, emotionally empty two-way conversations, all seemingly designed to sap cast and viewers' combined will to live. I wouldn't say it was emotionally empty. I mean, I think there was some good acting. I think the subject of grief came out quite well in the characters, in the mother Ramonda and her daughter, and mourning T'Challa, but also of course, well, should I tell you this? All right, it's a spoiler. Ramonda dies as well, and then everyone has to mourn her, which of course makes Shuri the queen who has to handle the war as the first part of her reign. As I say, this is interesting. Wakanda Forever. Now, 8 months before filming on Black Panther, Wakanda Forever was due to begin, the production was stricken by the tragedy with the death of Chadwick Boseman, Marvel's incumbent King T'Challa, and one of the most popular on its burgeoning stable of heroes. Yeah, and it says here the script was speedily redrafted by returning writer-director Ryan Coogler. Yeah, so that puts some meat on the bone of my theory earlier on. Of course, when Chadwick Boseman died, they already were into pre-production on the program and had to basically rewrite it without him in it. Yeah, and I think you can see, as I said, you can see it. You can see it perhaps in some of the quality control that was lost, but also, as I said earlier, in the very abrupt, incomprehensible and very, very jarring plot diversion. It's the thing. Yeah, I think possibly the plot diversion was because they didn't rewrite it perhaps as much as they should have, which is a shame. Like I said, I'd like them to have carried on with the original idea and maybe, I don't know, even brought in a new character or something. And it says here, the script was speedily redrafted, very speedily. You can see, actually, that the problems, like I've said, it was maybe rushed. But more tumult was in store. The shoot dragged on for 9 months due to COVID-related upheaval, as well as an injury sustained by Letitia Wright, whose Princess Shuri, T'Challa's younger sister, and presumed heiress of the Black Panther mantle, was reportedly at the hub of a reworked plot. Yes, she is. She is like the central character. She had some kind of injury, but you can't see it. She obviously recovered. Anyway, as things have worked out, plot barely applies. The film is bookended by some sweet in memoriam material. First, T'Challa's funeral, in which the Wakandans line the capital street in white ceremonial raiment. That's actually very well done. Actually, yeah. It has the feel of traditional Africa, in the shadow of these huge supermodern skyscrapers and anti-gravity aircraft. And later, a hover key branch scene in which Shuri and Nakia grievously discuss their kingdom's future, and Boseman himself movingly appears in a flashback montage. Yes, I mean, but only at the very start. There's like a series of shots which kind of seg into the title sequences. In between these two bright spots, however, lies a staggeringly tedious feud between Wakanda and the Atlantis-like kingdom of Talokan, ruled over by Namor. Oh, it's Namor. I thought it was Nemo. I thought he was called. All right, but he's Kukul Khan, they called him. This Namor is a dull, grandstanding nitwit. All right. Well, again, I don't really care about all that because, like I said, it dissolves into a very shallow, very, very simplistic, basically series of fight scenes. It's not the war. It's just exactly what you'd expect, I think. Yeah. Anyway, so that's basically it. It's only Nagoyu and Winston Duke, and whose avuncular mountain tribe chief M'Baku makes a welcome return. All right, that's the people who, I thought they were all Calibans, but they're called Jabari or something. They live up in the mountains, and they're really funny. They're really funny. Yeah. So again, that is the Daily Telegraph, and again, I'm yet to see anything I really disagree with in these reviews. We have, of course, Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, the only RT that is still allowed on TV. Yes, Rotten Tomatoes, of course, the go-to place for the review of reviews. And as you can see, the Tomatometer scores 84% on critics' reviews and 94%. It's a whopping 94% audience score. So quite clearly, a random aggregate of reviews seems to regard this as a very, very good film. I mean, I think they don't agree with a lot of it. I mean, obviously, whoever these 84% of critics who like it are, they are not the Guardian or certainly not the Telegraph. So I don't know. I don't know if it's just this thing that I talked about in the original, with the original film, the first Black Panther movie. You had like you had like people almost moral blackmailed into liking it for conceptual reasons, like I explained, because basically because of political correctness. I think it's ironic they're applying this to a film with actually far less cultural Marxist propaganda than I expected to find, but it was still one of these things it was the film you have to like. And indeed, you see that about other political correct films. I mentioned in my worst movies video, I mentioned Get Out by Jordan Peele, which is an abysmal movie, but everyone says they like it. It's one of these things. Everyone says they love The Great Leader. It's one of those sorts of things. But this film is pretty, in terms of its cultural Marxist weight, it carries about as much as the original. It's just not as good. It's just far less good than the original. And again, I mean, people who've seen it may well realise that. I assume they're going to realise that. But anyway, there you go. That's Rotten Tomatoes for you. We move on to the New York Times. I have to do a New York Times voice. Yes. What does the Great Lady have to say about this? I must apologise if I don't get this accent exactly right. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is in theatres. Let's talk about it. Here's what people are writing about the movie. This is by Kalia Richardson. The sequel to the thunderous Marvel hit Black Panther, which again gained $1.3 billion at the box office in 2018, finally reached theaters Friday, leaving many fans teary-eyed and slack-jawed. If you're among the many like myself who trudged out of the theater ready to talk about every gut-wrenching, seat-shaking scene in the nearly 3-hour film, these articles are for you. They spotlight some of the memorable moments and provide background on the movie's origins. Alright, so this is like a series of smaller articles. How did Chadwick Boseman's death affect the cast? Rebuilding Black Panther, how the Wakanda Forever family fought through grief and injury to create a $250 million superhero tribute. The Variety writers Angelique Jackson and Adam B. Vary dive into the production side and talk about the cast members Angela Bassett and Letitia Wright, along with director Ryan Coogler and producer Nate Moore. They discuss how they learned of the death of Chadwick Boseman, who plays King T'Challa, in 2020 following a secret 4-year battle with colon cancer, how they channeled their grief into the film, and how Wright pushed forward after being hospitalized for an injury on the set. Oh dear. I didn't say what her injury is, but it was obviously something she recovered from, because she got out of hospital and carried on filming, I presume. This is also from New York Times. The women of Wakanda Forever. The women of Wakanda have not only built a sisterhood, but a sanctuary to mourn, reflect, and pray on and off camera. The New York Times' contributing critic at large, Salamisha Tillett, offers... What? Salamisha Tillett? Is that a name? Salamisha Tillett, yeah. Offers an insight on how the women-led cast... Women! Sorry, I should do that voice when I say that word, shouldn't I? Shed stereotypes about female inferiority, learned on each other in moments of distress, inspired young girls across the globe. This is a typical feminist trope. They shed stereotypes about female inferiority by being masculine. It's nonsense. This is nonsense. Of course, like Okoye and Shuri, of course, as I said earlier, they're these masculine, lean, muscular women who act like men. They're fighters. They're warriors. And women who can't do that, I don't think are inferior. Women who don't. This is what a lot of critics said about the new Lord of the Rings. Is that Galadriel is a warrior in it earlier, because it's set in the First Age where Galadriel is a warrior. Galadriel's never been a warrior. Galadriel's power comes from her magic, her ability to wield magical power. She's a holy woman. I don't want to say witch because that's sort of negative. The positive equivalent of a witch. A white witch she is. And I don't see what's wrong with that. It says this inspires young girls across the globe. Well, it's inspiring them to say, well, a woman who's more masculine is more powerful because she can beat up tough guys twice her size. That somehow makes her more of a woman. And of course, it's always white men she beats up, isn't it? Always white men. And I don't have to repeat points I've made before about feminism, but that is completely at odds with our biology and our culture. And I hope more and more people realise that. As I said, it would be better if they simply made these characters male. It would have been better. They don't. It doesn't. And this is happening all over TV in Hollywood now. They're essentially creating male characters and getting women to play them. It's the opposite of what they used to do in theatres in the old days, where women couldn't be on stage. Female characters are played by men in drag and things like that. They're doing the opposite now. They're bringing these characters who are essentially male in all but name and biology, and they're getting them played by women. And I don't think, as I said, I think there's a sinister. It's giving out a sinister message, probably deliberately, to try and mess with our heads. That's what I think they're doing. Wakanda Forever alters how superhero stories handle death. Well, that's true. Yeah, that's very, very true. I do think that the grief element comes out in this new script because of the grief that the production team actually suffered. Well, this is interesting here. The Marvel Studios president, Kevin Feige, resisted calls to recast T'Challa. This shift showed audiences to mourn the death of both the actor and his character. Yeah, that's interesting, because someone was saying, well, simply stick with the old script and just bring in a new actor to play T'Challa. And he said no. Now, that's probably not a bad idea, actually. It's probably not a bad idea. Bringing in a new actor to play the same character would be a disaster. It would be a travesty. Yeah. And here we go. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever does the near impossible. In the first film, we entered the high-tech kingdom Wakanda, hidden in plain sight by a protective shield in Africa. That's interesting, actually. If you remember, Wakanda is a completely sealed-off society. It's completely unknown to the outside world. But you're flying over people. Obviously, planes fly over it every day. But when they look down, they actually see a projected image. It's almost like a projector screen in the air, which, by using some science fictional technological method, keeps the city, the high-tech city underneath, invisible. Funnily enough, in the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, something similar happens in this place called Galt's Gulch, which is kind of like it's like a kind of libertarian paradise up in the mountains. And they do exactly the same thing. It has exactly the same feature. So when you're flying above it, you can't actually look down. You just see a normal mountain landscape. But what's actually there is an entire community. Excuse me. And here it gives a summary of the previous film, and then following Killmonger's push to overtake the world's colonizers with Wakanda's indestructible vibranium. As I said, overtake the world's colonizers. That's actually something the critic has said, and I don't think that was really in the film. As I said, there was they laid off the political correctness very, very effectively. I think they did a good job. Not only did they underplayed. I would say they underplayed it. I would say they made a deliberate effort to avoid falling into the same rigmarole as so many other productions. It's almost like they were aware of that and actually wanted to avoid it. It's just they're going to make it another film about evil white people hurting black people and women. I mean, those films are now to a penny because there's so many of them. It's everywhere. Films with that theme are just pouring out of the woodwork. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. It talks about the water mutant. That's Nemo, whatever his name is. Along the way, we're introduced to new characters like Riri Williams, a young inventor whose technology is coveted by Western powers but hated by the water dwellers. That's the underwater creatures. Excuse me. It's fueled by this film. Wakanda Forever is fueled by intricate world building, stunning design sets and costumes, and an interest in the geopolitical implications of superheroism. That's far more nuanced than most Marvel movies allowed. Well, you could say that for the first one, but not for the second. It's not nuanced at all. And as for the geopolitical implications, that starts off with that and then just abandons it, just throws it out the window. That's the plot. I was thought, wow, this is going to be good. We're going to have a story about how they're going to. We're going to have a story about how Queen Ramonda is going to try and reverse disclosure. And then we had that raid by the French Special Forces on the outreach centre in Mali. And I thought, this is great. There's going to now be a struggle between the Wakandans and the rest of the world for the secrecy of the technology. I thought that would be a brilliant plot element. And this is another one here. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, women on the home front. As co-chief critic A.O. Scott puts in his review, Wakanda has become, at least for the moment, a matriarchy. And amid family loss. Yeah, it's interesting, there are powerful women. You see, Ramonda, the Queen Ramonda, is not like that. See, she's a powerful woman. She's the queen at the beginning, and until her death. She's a powerful feminine woman. She's very feminine, you know. Nakia is also feminine, T'Challa's wife. Yet Ramonda in particular carries a lot of authority. She's a feminine woman who would never be in a fight, but she carries a huge amount of authority because women have ways of wielding power of their own in a natural sense, which is different from men's. But they're not weaker. Women are not weaker than men. Just because they lack physical strength that men do, does not mean they lack strength. They see, you know, feminists see everything in such a shallow manner. They really do. They see everything. It's so superficial. The feminist view of the world is just so superficial. No wonder feminists are so miserable. So they find innovative ways to tackle the new challenges while mourning their empathetic leader T'Challa. Does it work? It's a Marvel movie for sure, but a pretty interesting one, partly because it's also a Ryan Coogler film with the director's signature interplay of genre touchstones, vivid emotions, and allegorical implications. It mentions the score. Now, the score is very interesting, actually, because Ludwig Göransson is the composer. It's not like your average score. I mean, the music is actually quite interesting. There's lots of different. There's harps. Sometimes there's just percussion in the sort of African-style percussion. Then there's like harp music and sometimes bongos and things, and then flutes. It's a really interesting music, actually. It says here, this is a sumptuous elegy. This is another review. A sumptuous elegy for a king. If you're looking just to relieve the high-tension opening scene moment of comic relief by the Jabari tribe leader M'Baku, what? That's not the opening scene. The opening scene is when T'Challa dies. Or the epic battles between Dora Milaje and the water mutant creatures. No, it's well, it's if you like action movies, you'll like that bit. But if you just are satisfied with that and nothing else, you won't mind this film. But if you want something a bit deeper, like the first film was, you won't like this film, I don't think. Who is Namor? Oh, that's the creature. He's got like a kind of Latin American accent. He plays this immortal. Well, he's not immortal because he dies at the end, but he doesn't get old. But he's this underwater sort of amphibious creature with wings on his ankles called Namor or Kukulkan. Yeah. It's just interesting, yeah, because a lot of the dialogue is in the Maya language as well, which is quite something. Yeah. So what's next? All right, there's going to be a Black Panther 3. Oh my goodness. That no breadcrumbs were left after a San Diego Comic-Con presentation about the movie in July. All right, okay. Oh, well, that's the New York Times, so probably the most interesting of all the reviews.
So that was my review of Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. Thank you all of you for watching Japan Road TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.